The fire service is a lifestyle. Some of us grew up knowing that this is what we would do. Others found it later in life. We all have a story to tell. We live a career of experience and knowledge. But what happens when we retire? All that knowledge and experience walks out the door. Welcome to Capture the Knowledge.
I started in the fire service in 1991. In that time, I was thinking about it when I saw that this question might come up, and that it was a time of a lot of transition in the fire service. If you think about it, paramedics first came about. It was the first, a lot of mergers and stuff. So it was an interesting time. You had a lot of old school firefighters that came up through learning construction or learning electrical, learning different things, and then all of a sudden you had this band of paramedics come in, and it wasn't all that. It was a huge transition for the fire service to shift over like that. So being a part of that was interesting. I had spent 8 years in the private ambulance service. So I came from a background of being very comfortable with paramedicine and transporting, and that was my way into the fire service. I never had anticipated being a firefighter, ever. But after completing my college stuff and deciding what I was going to do, a bunch of my colleagues had taken the Sac Cities exam. And I thought, well, they're foolish. Why would they want to do that? That was kind of a dumb thing. And then when they all got promoted or they got in, and I thought, well, I really missed out on an opportunity. And a good friend of mine, he said, hey, you know, American River's hiring. And it was actually the next day was the final filing date. So I went over and I filled it out, and it was a wonderful opportunity. So I would have missed that had I not taken that chance. At Metro?
Yes.
23 years.
23 years in the fire service.
Yes.
And you retired in?
I retired in, I got to think about this, 2014. Well, I do think it was kind of funny that, I gotta think about how to say that correctly. There were just a lot of really good times, a lot of growing and a lot of learning. So even all the experiences were good. I had wonderful people to work with that kind of showed me the way to do certain things I had no idea how to do. So there was a lot of growth in learning things I didn't know. I knew paramedicine, but I didn't know building construction, fireground hydraulics, and all that stuff. And those opened up huge worlds for me too, and something I was just adamantly interested in. Well, I did pursue, I think my biggest avenue when I came in as a probationary firefighter was my interest in the engineer position. So Captain Dan Frank, I remember working with him and with Chief Cooper at the time, Mark Cooper, on fireground hydraulics. And I just thought that was the dream job, that this was it. This was what I needed to do. And I was kind of a little bit obsessed with that particular part of the job. It just fascinated me. So that was where my initial focus was for many years. I was an engineer for, I'd say, 9 years, if I calculated that correctly, and it's been great. Mm-hmm. In fact, my very last shift that I ever did, Steve DeFoy asked me, he goes, what do you want to do for your last day? And I said, all I really want to do is be an engineer. And so he let me take the engineer spot for the day. He shifted over the captain's seat. Best last shift ever. It was great. I did. I spent my probationary firefighter time at 103 and 105, a couple other places, but the majority of my 22 years as both firefighter, engineer, and captain were at Station 103.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of Kelly Tassone anytime I go there.
Yeah. I don't know if that's good or bad. It was. So I'd say there was, like, for Sac City, it wasn't an anomaly, but for American River Fire at the time, I was not the first any female there. several came before me, a handful.
Okay.
But it definitely changed the way the fire service was. I mean, it definitely was different for many of the individuals who work there. It was definitely dominated by men.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of what some of the... Let me think about it for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Are we answering that okay?
This is the editable part here.
Yeah. I think it did present itself with some challenges, but those weren't just my challenges. They were challenges for the crews as well. Dealing with, I think the asset is trying to be the same or one of the firemen. At the same time, you're different or you stand out a little differently than somebody else. And so I had a lot of great mentors along the way. I'll tell you, one of the things before I got in the fire service is when I told my dad I was going to apply to the fire service, he said, I don't think women can do that job. He goes, but if they can, you can. And so that was like, for me, that was like, hey, he kind of reflected an attitude that I was prepared to see, and yet he gave me support to do it, which I think was huge for me. I had a battalion chief, my first battalion chief was Schultz, who was amazing. He came in the very first moment I met him, and he said to me, he goes, well, here it is. He goes, I don't know anything about women in the fire service, but I'm excited to learn. And so I was treated very well, and not favored or not unfavored, just, hey, let's see what happens. Let's just make it work. And a couple other captains along the way, the training captains I had were great as well, and gave me confidence that I could do the job just as well. So that was huge for me.
What a great attitude to take.
Yeah.
We don't know what we're walking into here, but we're going for it.
And it was so refreshing. It was honest. It was, and it was honest. You know, it wasn't one of those things where you say something and you wait for that person to walk out of the room and then you say something completely different. He was very open and honest about things.
And he's actually one of the people on my hit list to
Yes!
sit down and interview.
He's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be looking for him.
Yes, I'll put a buzz in his ear.
Great. Great. And if I can get his phone number.
I will get that for you.
Yes.
I can do that. I can definitely do that.
Great. Great.
Well, I definitely would encourage them. It's funny that you say that too, because my daughter, who's 24 now, is just gotten into EMS. So it's incredibly interesting. The things that she's going through are the same things I went through 30 years ago, and they're exactly the same. If that is what you want to do, a young female who's strong and independent and wants to do the job, there's nothing that should keep them from doing that. If it's truly what you want to do, then there's every avenue is open for you within the fire service. Well, I would say that to respect the job that you want to do it's a constant learning experience. So I think to offset the fact that you may be younger in it or may not know as much, you train constantly. You think about hydraulics. One of the things that will keep you from achieving your potential is to think that, hey, I've just gotten the job, therefore my training stops. I've got the badge and I don't need to learn anymore because I've achieved already. Being an engineer is a constant learning process. You take every incident that you have, you say, what if, how would I have made it different? How do I keep making it better? I started as an engineer, I think in 95, I want to say, and here it is, I'm still teaching it, and I'm still learning better ways to do things, so that your education never stops. But if you have that basic knowledge of how things work, then you just need some time under your belt with actual experience with doing that. Yeah. But to always keep it like paramedicine or EMT stuff is like, don't get overwhelmed in the situation. Take a big step back, take a big breath, start with your ABCs of fire engineering. Water in and water out is always the best base for getting things done.
It's a great phrase, isn't it?
It really is. So people come into class and they'll go, I want to know more than water in, water out. And then it's so funny. So you tell them all this stuff and then say, basically, it still is water in, water out. Yeah.
You can remember that at 3 o'clock in the morning.
You can remember at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it makes sense. Well, I think from the very beginning, like I said, Captain Dan Frank at 103, we spent a lot of time. He had to. I've never been one to be natural at anything, but if I have an interest at it, I generally have to do a lot more work to get up to where people usually start at. So he really helped set a base for me of doing that. The avenues that I took were immediately I started teaching as a assistant teacher with Mark Cooper, as well as I had an opportunity to do EVOC in I believe 1997 to about 2003, and I jumped on that opportunity because it was something I liked to do. I didn't know a lot about it at the time, but it was where my interest was. So even if it didn't come naturally, my desire was there to know it as thoroughly as possible. Finding your way in. I mean, if you have an interest, don't wait for somebody to come find you and say, what are your interests and here's your niche. If you have an interest, you find somebody that's going to help you make it better and to help pursue that. Be an active advocate for your own interest. Well, and the fire service is so diverse in the things that it does, whether it's water rescue or the helicopter program or trucking, whatever it is, that to reach out to people and say, hey, I really want to know what you know. And they'll be flattered and they'll be honored to help you for the most part. I think it's great as a captain, and as well, getting somebody, fresh in off probation and seeing them grow. So interesting that you say that, because I remember the very beginning and doing some search drills at 41, with Brian Harless and Chris Hicks that was there at the time.
Yep.
Yeah, and the fact that now you're a captain and you're running your own boat, it's pretty cool. Makes me feel old, but it's very cool to see how knowledge progresses over time.
Yeah, passing it on.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember dragging Harless across the floor at 41, thinking, man, I need to get into the gym.
Exactly. Yeah. I had a similar experience on probation, though. I will tell you that, because you talked about being female in the fire service, so a lot of things went to, are you physically fit enough to do this job? Mm-hmm. So I remember we had the same drill that you had, and it was, but Scott Cochran, I had to pull him out of a building, and the building had oil on it, and we had to squirt water first in the right pattern. And so when I went to pick Scott up, I kept falling on the ground because it was slicker than anything. So at the end of my portion of the drill, the captain goes, hey, get in here. And he went to try and pick Scott up, and he fell multiple times on the floor because it was wet. But it was just kind of funny, It's like, can't do much about it. So, and it was on probation that I did that drill, and I never forgot about that. How to get your feet under you, or how to get around, or get the right help to get out of there. Yeah.
Right.
It's good.
Right. Yeah.
I think until you're in that, and certainly this is just my opinion on that, but one of the things I think that changes is the armchair quarterbacking that you have the luxury of doing as a firefighter and as an engineer. And all of a sudden you're moved to the captain position where you are making decisions. And those decisions, good, bad, or indifferent, they're your decisions to make. Where if you're, prior to that being a firefighter or an engineer, you make a mistake, it still falls on somebody else, or you train. It's I think the first step in the supervisory position that people really start taking a look at your judgments and decision making and judge it more finely than they did before. I could be wrong. I think probably the pattern of being able to plan your own day, to be able to grow and make decisions based on what you had learned prior to that. You just don't get that opportunity in any of the other positions that you have, as far as size up and the continuing playing out of a call and all that kind of stuff, as well as the challenges of the day-to-day station living and all that other stuff. But it's I think it's challenging, but I think it's also very rewarding. No, I also think there's a great place for career firemen and career engineers as well. I mean, I think that they're outstanding, that they bring a depth of knowledge to the new people that is absolutely irreplaceable to be able to tell them what they know. I only spent three and a half years as a firefighter before I promoted. With these guys who spent their entire career there. I mean, they definitely have seen a lot more. Well, I think that the ultimate responsibility in that is overwhelming. That as cool as it is to be able to drive a piece of equipment, I when I first started in emergency services was a long time ago. I remember the first time I drove Code 3. I remember that as being, wow, just an overwhelming kind of moment. But I think the big thing is to say that that comes with a huge amount of responsibility to all of the other people on the roadway. And to be safe out there, you always have to make sure that you are in control of every aspect of your mental, your physical, and the apparatus at all times. I think that's it, just to be safe out there. And that's probably, yeah, I don't know.
Could we call it due regard?
We could. I was trying not to call it due regard, just because everybody's, you know, and so for me, what's kind of cool is in teaching the EVOC is that you take a person out there in an academy class setting and you're with them for a matter of time. You see a tremendous amount of growth with that individual in a very short amount of time. That to me is so incredibly rewarding. I've had the luxury of still being there, and I'll go and helping some people with engineers exams or something like that. And they'll come back and they'll say something that I've told them before, and it's such an honor to hear that. It's just it's pretty cool. So I think we have a great group of people out there who have a great foundation to keep this going in the positive direction, and I have a lot of faith in them. I think from early on in the fire service, what drew me in or what I liked about it was being able to go and help people out and actually learning a skill that was helpful to people. One of the things I don't think I've talked about is how I first got involved in EMS. Was I was in a horrible accident when I was 16, and a bunch of people came and couldn't help me. They just stood around and looked at me and did all, just they were not helpful. And I decided that was not going to be me, and that's how I pursued my thing. But I think that's common to people in the fire service is they're out there to not stand around, to get involved and to make something horrible better for whoever's involved in that. That was true 30 years ago. I think it's still true today, and I hope in the future that I don't foresee the fire service changing from that. And I think that's the one thing that has been consistent over time. Yeah, and what it's about. So maybe it's not about the long hours or there's so many things that you can get wrapped up in. But when it comes down to it, I did a tiller test just today, and I watched the public in awe of the tiller driving down the road, and there wasn't a person that wasn't waving in respect or just and to respect that back, to respect the honor you have of being able to provide a service to them is pretty cool. Yeah, it is. And I don't know that you really recognize that. Being retired and how is retirement going, it's a mind blow to spend a lot of time doing the same thing and then walking out one day and having that all be done. It's bittersweet. You miss things like sitting around the coffee table and being really hands-on on your friends' lives and everything that's going on. But at the same time, so it's nice to still be able to contribute and still feel like I'm serving by being able to provide some training services that I really enjoy doing.
And it's a huge service to our district, what you're doing now.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I get a lot out of it. It makes me feel like that I'm, like I said, the service thing we talked about, that's still a piece of who I am, and I will miss that greatly.
But you're not ever leaving.
No, I'm never leaving. Never. No, but things life keeps going on, right? So eventually things will change. But I really enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy working with people, and it's been an honor. Um, I think the planning ahead part, using your retirement, using your deferred comp kind of stuff. I mean, all those things, setting yourself up for the future so you're not stuck in a bad situation when you retire. Um, I think those things are all good. Staying physically fit is important. And keeping, there's a lot of things I think in the fire service that are better now than they were before, and I could be wrong. But there's the emotional elements of that, of the job, that to leave there and not have any, like a lot of people that maybe had an event or things that are kind of messing with them, that when they retire they don't have those outlets. So keep in touch with your friends that have retired to make sure they're still doing okay and feel like they're a part of it, because I think that's the big thing, is when you walk out the door to think that you've been completely forgotten. I think that would be hard on a retirement basis to say. You gave 25 years and you walk out the door and it's an odd feeling. I have my girls all over the place, and I have horses, and I still do that. We'll do some travel once this COVID restrictions and stuff get out of place. We'll definitely be doing a lot more of that. But right now, I'm doing everything that I love to be doing, and I got to find something as exciting as EVOC to keep me going. So it's going to be a challenge, but I'll find it sometime.
Kelly Tassone, retired captain, Metro Fire, 23 years of service, and you're still serving. Thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me on Capture the Knowledge today.
Thank you, Jeff.